And I think people need to expand out of this purely human-centered view of the universe, this purely human experience that we've been living, to suggest maybe we're part of a larger ecosystem of life.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Watch Mojo or Unveiled. You may be watching on either of those channels. I'm your host, Rob, and today we are talking about UAPs. I'm here with a special guest, Reed Summers, who is a writer, speaker, and podcaster focusing on UAPs. And he's here with me to break all the most recent news down and take us back to where this all started and where it's going. So, Reed, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Rob. Great to be here.
I think it's important to provide a little bit of context because WatchMojo doesn't typically do a lot of long form interviews, but in this case, we felt like it was kind of warranted. This is a huge topic, and we have published a few videos covering UAPs recently. They've all been met with a great response, so there's clearly a big interest in our audience. So what I was hoping was that we could start by taking it back to 2017. The New York Times article that kind of got the ball rolling with all of this brought UAPs into the mainstream conversation a little bit. And I think that you're a great person to kind of walk us through it up till where we are now. So yeah, let's start with a little recap, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So as many know, back in 2017, three journalists, Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper, published an article in the New York Times regarding a secret Pentagon program named ATIP, which was tasked with $22 million of funding that was facilitated by Senator Harry Reid to study specifically the military implications of UFOs, instances of altercations, incursions, that sort of thing, and to basically assess the national security state of affairs regarding that. With that article came out three Navy videos, which are now collectively referred to as the Gimbal, the FLIR video, and the Go Fast video, which basically showed craft with performance capabilities and unusual flight characteristics that could not be resolved by ATIP and other government programs that had studied them. And these were released alongside that article. They were later confirmed to be authentic by the Defense Department, and they were later re-released by the Defense Department to clear up any kind of confusion regarding them. After 2017, a number of events took place. There was the standing up of the UAP task force, which was required by Congress to basically review those same incidences and ones like them, like the Tic Tac incident in 2004, and to report back on the potential national security risks and possible foreign surveillance or technologies that might be implied by them. And that was pushed forward by senators like Marco Rubio, and that culminated in a June 2021 preliminary assessment of UAP to Congress, which, as events unfolded, led to a May 2022 hearing in Congress, which was the first of three hearings that have now taken place. So a lot of events. Obviously, this has burst into the public discourse and public consciousness, the possibility that there is a technology of non-human, non-Earth origin, alongside other technologies that are most likely foreign adversary or prosaic in nature, and that by all possibilities, this is being controlled or piloted by a form of non-human intelligence. And that's really where the conversation is heading, I think, as we stand today.
Right. And so this leads us to the most recent hearing that happened on November 13th, which WatchMojo covered with top 10 moments from that hearing. And so I'm curious to know, what were your biggest takeaways from that? And I'm curious to know if they align with what we deem to be in the top 10 moments from the hearing.
Oh yeah, well, I watched them with eyes glued to the screen to see, what was said, what was revealed. I think some of my top moments, number one would have been Congresswoman Mace pressing Lou Elizondo regarding, quote, alien, end quote, craft, because the word alien has been kind of, cautiously avoided over the course of events as the word or the term non-human intelligence or NHI has been preferred because it's potentially more all-encompassing of the variety of phenomena that might be at play. But Congresswoman Mace asked Lou Elizondo, I can quote, were they designed to identify and reverse engineered alien craft, yes or no? To which Elizondo said yes. And I thought that was definitely a high point in the hearing. In another instance, Lou was also pressed on what are these non-human biologics? Were they a part of the transfer from Lockheed Martin to the OSAP program back in the 2008 timeframe? To which he said, well, they predate his time, both career and in the world, suggesting that these biologics might be Roswell or post-Roswell related, but that they are connected, different but connected. I thought that was a definite notable moment. And then Congressman Moskowitz, when essentially Lou, and this happened with a number of the witnesses, basically said when pressed for more information or specifics, I can't tell you more, I've signed NDAs. Congressman Moskowitz basically floated the statement, well, you can't talk about Fight Club, because there's no Fight Club, which is to say, though you can't say anything about it, the fact that you can't say anything about it says that there's a there. And I think that highlighted the frustration of the congressmen and congresswomen chairing the hearings. And I think that was on full display. In so many cases, they were pressing the witnesses for, give us the details we need, to which they said, we can't say anything. And then the Congress people turned to the camera in essence and said, do you see the obfuscation? And not by the witnesses specifically, but by the system that prevents them from disclosing what they know in order for Congress to have appropriate and legal oversight over these special access programs or SAPs, of which there are acknowledged, unacknowledged, and then waived. And I think it's suggested that a lot of the deep UAP specific programs are in the waived category of that spectrum.
Right. So you mentioned that they never use the term alien at any point, but they kind of dance around it and find other creative terms to use, which kind of suggests aliens, wouldn't you think? What do you make of the language that they use to describe these phenomena?
Right. I mean, I think NHI is being preferred for several reasons. First, it is more all-encompassing of a variety of phenomena that might be taking place. It also circumvents the ridicule that has been stacked up upon the word alien, little green men, and people who believe that that's what's taking place. And so it allows kind of a way to get to the public and to talk to the public about the possibility that we're not alone without jumping to the conclusion of physical, biological, non-human aliens. But in so many cases, they have gone right to that edge and just over. I mean, the word alien has been used before in the 2023 hearing with David Grush. In his testimony, he specifically spoke of non-human biologics, right? Which is, you have to wonder, if it's not alien, well, what are they talking about? And according to my understanding, there is, in fact, indications that a physical, non-human alien or extraterrestrial presence is a component of the phenomenon that we're seeing. And I think, as the public comes into the awareness of a non-human intelligence, and we start to ask the questions about nature, origin, being, physicality, non-physicality, I think it's going to end up at the very predictable line of aliens. And, when you see the media coverage after the most recent hearing and before, by and large, what the public thinks when they hear non-human intelligence is aliens. And that is where the conversation seems to need to go.
I was looking at the comment section of our video covering the hearing, and I think one of the top comments said something to the effect of, I was telling my wife about it after I was watching the hearing, and her response was, oh my God, I'm so busy, I don't even have time for this in my life. I'm not sure if that's an indication of what the general consensus is for the public, but what do you think the perception is, generally speaking? Are people ready for a reveal as big as there are extraterrestrials that are visiting our planet?
Yeah, great question, and really the focus of my work. I think society is more ready than we think it is, especially at the citizen, level, in terms of what most people think is possible, given the findings of science and the discovery of exoplanetary systems. that can harbor Earth-like worlds that might have a terrestrial surface on which, life like our own can arise. And I think science has brought us to this point of recognizing the obvious possibility. If life has arisen here, it can arise elsewhere. If sentient life could arise here, why not elsewhere in this vast universe? So when I talk to people, and I do talk to a lot of folks about this kind of from the ground up, by and large, they can handle the concept of aliens. When I start to go into interdimensionality, or that there's a demonic aspect to it, which I don't necessarily think accurately reflect the phenomenon, that's where it starts to kind of get more confusing. And I think people are ready to entertain the possibility that we're not alone in our universe, and that the events of the 20th century, a very unique century in the history both of the planet and the human civilization and its development, such as World War on a scale never seen before, the detonation of nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, and the technological strides we're making in every way possible, right? That those could be detectable signatures by a non-human intelligence from beyond our world that might have prompted an observation, a visitation, possibly even an intervention into our world. I think people can get this. It is a lot at the level of paradigm, the level of how one places humanity in the universe, at the center of that universe, or at the center of God's concern and God's plan, if you are of a religious disposition. And so I think there are some real challenges there. But I think, society is ready for this. And what this could do to revolutionize our sense of place and participation in a larger universe, to make us realize that we are all human beings. This is a fundamentally new, commonly held identity that is possible now of being human, and that could supersede other identities that divide us and generate ongoing competition and conflict, whether it's over ethnic, national, religious, socioeconomic lines. I think people are ready for a mind-expanding and species-uniting realization that could potentially have great power to move us beyond some of the crises that we are plagued with in our world.
Yeah, it's nice to think that it might be more of a unifying thing for human beings to bring us together, knowing that we're just one of probably a vast number of species that exist in the universe. You mentioned technology advancing rapidly over the past century, and I think that's very notable because somebody mentioned, I believe it was Mike Gold, I'm not sure, speaking about non-human intelligence. I think somebody floated the idea that that doesn't necessarily mean biological intelligence. It might mean artificial intelligence or computer intelligence. Did you observe that, and what do you think of that?
Definitely. And, we don't know yet everything about what's taking place in our world. So some of the craft are of a certain size that might make it less likely that they're being actually piloted by a physical being. Maybe they are controlled by some form of technology or super AI that's, moving throughout the universe, scouting planets of promise, or, vulnerable situations for them to either insert themselves into or exploit in some way. We don't know the entirety of it. So yes, I think that's possible. I would argue that in the vast range of possibilities, in terms of possible explanations for the phenomenon, there are more logical and probable explanations that we need to consider. I think, the record within ufology of physical craft that are responsive to human beings, that have engaged in evasive maneuvers or actual altercations with human military craft, and in some cases have actually harmed people, seemingly with intent. That's an important data point. On the other side, on the direct human and possible NHI interaction, I think, there are indications that people have encountered physical, biological entities with evolved physical structures that suggest that these life forms may have evolved within a universe of resource constraints, environmental pressure, and competition. Why else would they have digits and eyes and mouths and, digestive tract and so forth? So there are indications that there is an interaction with a physical alien entity. And so taken into account, I don't think we're dealing with a purely mechanistic phenomenon or that is purely a form of technology. I think, there's the craft, but then there's the controller. And I think we need to get to the conversation about who's behind the wheel, who's piloting these craft for what purpose. Why did they enter our Earth and human system? Why are they making these incursions over military sites, sensitive nuclear installations, and potentially entering forms of contact, some of which are non-consensual with people around the world, as has been reported.
Do you think that that's where the conversation is headed in terms of the mainstream discourse? Because now we're having these hearings and it's acknowledged that there are these craft appearing, and being observed by mostly military, but I mean, everybody. It's just that they're focusing on the military examples. Is the next step in this conversation talking about who's piloting them and what the intent is and what might come of that?
I think so. And I think we heard it in the final moments of the hearing in Congress several weeks ago when all four witnesses were asked very directly and in succession, what does non-human intelligence mean to you? And Tim Gallaudet, retired Rear Admiral, said very specifically a higher form of intelligence. Lou, I believe, kind of anchored into a more basic definition of life, of being able to basically like cognate or make an intentional response. And the other two witnesses abstained from making a statement, but said, we need to know. So I think the conversation has to go to the question of NHI. Disclosure of UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, is one thing, right? And there are many prosaic explanations for some of that, for some of those objects, craft in the atmosphere. But we need to move to the side of the coin, which is, well, some of the UAP that are being investigated are not able to be explained as prosaic or as having human origin. So the ones that are not are transiting our Earth system at will. They're potentially operating in the oceans in ways that we cannot monitor or even understand. And so that's a problem. I think it is a realistic national security concern. I would argue it's actually a more existential world security concern. And my hope is that the disclosure conversation gets outside the national security, state defense intelligence apparatus of the United States and gets into more of an international conversation where we start to look at what are the frameworks or platforms by which our humanity can assert its sovereignty in this world, who gets to transit our border with space or our Earth system, atmosphere to ocean to terrestrial borders, who does not, and what are the kind of rules and regulations that should basically oversee the potential interaction with non-human intelligence, which some people think is taking place already.
Right. There's been mention made about Russia having recovered technology, China having recovered technology, as well as the United States, but we're only aware of the conversations that are happening within the US and North America largely. Do you think these conversations are being had in other countries as well?
Oh, absolutely. Back in the, let's see, I have it here. George Knapp basically undertook a special trip to the USSR before the end of the Cold War and basically gained access to individuals who were a part of what might have been the largest study into UFOs in human history. Tens of thousands of reports gathered, numerous individuals interviewed extensively, and guidance put forth by the Ministry of Defense regarding this being effectively a problem for state security at that time, and the potential for retaliation being a real one by non-human intelligence. So those conversations have happened. They go back to the Eisenhower era, the Carter administration, the JFK administration, which is an interesting one, connection there, and into the USSR before the end of the Cold War. So those conversations have been had. They're happening now, I don't doubt. I think they are heavily siloed due to the geopolitical tensions and kind of state competition between, large state actors. So how to break those silos down and begin some form of greater information sharing so that we can come to a collective understanding about what this visitation is, who the visitors are, and to begin to articulate pathways for a united human response to that visitation that doesn't basically sequester this inside the national security defense apparatuses of the state, the major global actors, and fuel what some have described as a secret arms race over technologies and science of non-Earth origin. That statement was made very clearly by Lou Elizondo in his opening remarks. in the congressional hearing several weeks ago.
A small cadre within our own government involved in the UAP topic has created a culture of suppression and intimidation that I've personally been victim to, along with many of my former colleagues.
That statement had also been made by David Grush, had been seconded by retired Colonel Carl Nell. And so there are former high-ranking government officials coming forward inside the United States saying that there is a secret arms race underway. To what degree that is fueling the present tensions and conflicts in the world, we don't know. But you can imagine the technologies that have been gained via these secret programs to recover crashed vehicles and reverse engineer them, presumably for military applications, would present some serious asymmetric capabilities to whoever gets to that technology first and develops it for viable military platforms. So the risk of the global public not knowing about this and allowing those programs to continue, I think, is very high. And I don't think we should count the NHI as neutral or as a removed actor simply in a state of observation. There are so many cases of direct incursions into civilian, military, government spaces that I think warrant concern and I think really compel us to get to the bottom of this enigma.
Right. It's repeatedly mentioned that these observed craft could be a security threat. And my interpretation is always that it's the craft themselves in their operation, in our territories that are the threat itself. But what you just said makes me also think that other countries that may have obtained this technology may be an even greater threat to us than the craft themselves that we're seeing flying around in our airspace that may not be of earthly origin.
Right. I mean, totally. So, the possibility of there being a threat is totally non-zero, right, from the NHI side. But when you look at the human side, the potential for unexpected, unanticipated hazards to ensue because someone got their hands on this technology in a way that was unsanctioned, unmanaged, not outside the legal frameworks that basically govern who does what with technology in the civil space, in the federal space. Yeah, the risks are very high, and we may be our own worst enemies, you could say. We humans tend to divide and balkanize ourselves over basically anything, and we struggle to come to consensus over numerous, real and present threats to world stability, whether it's the climate crisis, whether it's runaway AGI, so that there is not an AI, artificial intelligence, but an alien intelligence, which is depositing or transacting in our space technologies and science with certain state actors, possibly non-state actors, defense corporations, for example, in ways that we cannot manage or monitor is, I think, a very high-risk scenario for the world.
In terms of the development of disclosure of the phenomenon to the public, I was watching your conversation with Richard Dolan breaking down the hearings, and one of his theories was that perhaps it will get to the point where everybody will just know that extraterrestrials are here, and that's the point where the government will say, shucks, okay guys, we admit it, this has been happening. Do you think that's likely the scenario that will roll out, or will we get a big reveal that will shock everybody?
Great question. And a lot of folks are asking this question. I think there are multiple factions vying for the disclosure narrative and for various different agendas. I think it's plausible. There's a faction within the U.S. government that would want the slowest of acclamations, right? It's almost like no light switch, just a dawning that takes 50, 60, 70, 80 years. Richard Dolan has, posited that maybe it'll be something like the JFK assassination, where most people know that there was, a bad actor, that there was a conspiracy either by the government or the mob to kill JFK. They acknowledge it, but it's not earth shattering. It doesn't change their paradigm. They go about their daily affairs. They pay their taxes. The government citizen contract is intact. So yes, I think it's likely there is some faction that would prefer to see it that way. I do think there is another breakaway faction, however, that wants authentic disclosure for a variety of reasons. One is the obvious one, that it's simply, you could say, illegal to keep basic knowledge about science, the universe, human origins away from the human species and in the possession of unregulated special access programs that don't even respond or answer to their own government, right? And so to keep that basic understanding away from people, it's not okay. It is unethical. They don't have a right to privatize that knowledge. So I think that's one motive. Another is, I think there are some really difficult truths standing behind this phenomenon. Hard things have happened that have not been acknowledged. And the longer that stays secret, it sours, it putrefies, it becomes toxic, and it risks breaking out in a catastrophic way that completely compromises the citizen government contract, and that leads to massive societal disturbance. Whether that's the existence of an abduction phenomenon in which people have been taken non-consensually over many years by a non-human intelligence that the government was not able to effectively impede, was not able to match technologically. The government has that job of keeping us safe and secure and able to access our fundamental rights. And so if they were not able to do that, that's a hard truth. And how do they explain that to the people of the world? In addition, I think there's a third wheel to this cart moving down the road, and that is that the non-human intelligence has its own intent and agenda. They may choose to self-reveal in a way that undermines world stability or that seeks to upend the balance of power and favor, one world power over another. And, the potential of some form of retaliatory action, it has been suggested in some of the whistleblower testimony that's come out. Deals, it has been suggested, have potentially been made. Were those deals made on behalf of humanity's best interests or private interests? Were they a violation of people's individual sovereignty or our interest in planetary and human survival? Possibly. So the NHI is an actor in this equation too. They've been operating in a state of covert fashion, in a state of non-disclosure. And as long as that's the case, and as long as we are unable to verify potential claims made by a non-human intelligence, we're in this precarious position. We're a world divided, at war with itself, and there is another actor, another potential power present in our space with the technology and capabilities to alter our human journey in some key ways. And so I think that's another factor that might compel disclosure on a faster timeline and to a more complete degree than some would want.
I've heard some say that with the technology that has been allegedly recovered dating back to Roswell and perhaps earlier than that, if these things had been utilized for public good, that it could have advanced us technologically and just generally in society far beyond how far we've come up until now. Are you in agreement with that? Do you think they've been holding back technology that could have really benefited the human race over the past 50, 60, 70 years?
I don't know. I think, a lot of folks want to leap to this kind of, hopeful expectation that, well, these craft are able to perform in ways that defy physics, right? That have so much energetic potential, which if we were to harness that, we could fix the climate crisis, free energy for all, right? It might liberate us from our addiction to fossil fuels. I don't think leaping to that conclusion is warranted just yet. I don't know what exactly has been gained from these crashed vehicles, how much of their capabilities have been extracted and brought into marketable technologies that could positively, revolutionize society and equitable access to technology itself. I do know that, our human tendency to basically want to privatize those findings, market them, profit off of them, gain, whether it's market supremacy, defense, or intelligence advantage over a foreign adversary, for example, that's very high. So that these technologies would suddenly help society writ large, I wouldn't leap to that conclusion. If anything, I think they could be more of a divider than a unifier. And there's no real evidence that the non-human intelligence itself has gifted technology, no strings attached, that would positively help the human family at this time. Lou Elizondo has come out saying from his perspective, leading the ATIP program within the Defense Department, that there really are no indications of benevolent intent. That does not mean that they're malevolent. It just means that there is a dearth of indications that they are benevolent in intent. And I think that's a notable signal, and one that we should pay attention to.
I want to jump back a little bit to the hearing, and one thing that was revealed even leading up to the hearing, which was the Immaculate Constellation report by Michael Schellenberger. What can you say about that? What is the significance of that report? And in a nutshell, what is Immaculate Constellation and why is it important?
So, as far as I understand it, Immaculate Constellation was an umbrella special access program that was set up to basically collect high quality, immaculate video and sensor data regarding UAP and bring that into one space and manage it in that space. A constellation of special access programs collecting immaculate, right, high quality data. I was a little disappointed in the hearing when Michael Schellenberger was pressed for any indication as to where this individual might be. Are they even an employee of the Defense Department? And all he could prefer was that they are a former or current government employee. And again, this is the problem, is, to bring forward a document written by basically just someone, right, that whose identity we cannot verify. I know Michael Schellenberger verified that to his satisfaction, and that's definitely something as a credible journalist. But it's frustrating, right? And so I looked through the whole document. I think there are some eye-opening cases contained in that document. There are definitely some reveals regarding three-letter acronym agencies that have been coordinating crash recovery and reverse engineering efforts. I think, positive movement will take place by people connecting the dots on the different SAPs that are being identified, what government and defense and intelligence community entities those reside within. And hey, you know what? Maybe in the upcoming hearings, because this was meant to be one of a series of hearings, to my knowledge, they can call to the stands witnesses who were involved in those programs or who had oversight into numerous programs. Who knows? Maybe they can look down the list of, the secretaries of defense for the past 6 administrations, people who had that downward-looking potential oversight, bring them to the stands, ask them to testify on the record. So I think it's promising. I don't know if IC or Immaculate Constellation, that the acknowledgement of that program will itself move the needle that much. But I think we're getting very important data points, which might be connectable in some fashion, that start to reveal where within the vast intelligence and defense apparatus of the US, these programs have been sequestered, compartmentalized from congressional oversight, and undertaken probably largely outside the purview of government in the corporate space. And, we might look to, as disclosure rolls forward, other indications to corroborate the picture that's coming into view, such as, what defense companies are attempting to market certain exotic technologies. Who is doing foreign adversary technology acquisition and exploitation? Can we corroborate that with whatever Congress is able to understand or to glean from the testimony of these witnesses?
Right. And this isn't strictly a government thing. There are a lot of private companies also involved in these things. We hear a lot about Lockheed, Skunk Works, and other such companies. To what extent are they involved in this process, and how does that complicate things?
I think it complicates things a lot, and I would say their involvement is quite high. To my knowledge, the government lost a high degree of oversight and even access into these programs decades ago, pre-turn of the millennium, possibly back into the Reagan era. So these programs have proceeded to engage in potentially illegal programs using military and defense assets, whether that's financial or personnel or facilities, to potentially down these craft and extract the technologies that are extractable for unknown purposes. And, at one level, society would greatly benefit by having our best and brightest minds in on that process to bring forward the greatest insight from those discoveries and bring it into the civilian space, into the marketplace, and out of the defense apparatus in which it's lived. But yeah, I think a lot of this has shifted outside of the purview of government into the corporate defense contractor space. These are also multinational organizations. Their fidelity to one country is questionable, right? And so, are these technologies being transited across state lines in ways that would be potential risk to national security, at least in this country? Yeah, I think that's very possible as well.
We had mentioned whistleblowers, and I think that's an important issue to discuss because, as we said, Michael Schellenberger was reluctant to reveal any information about the source of his report. And I think that this is a big issue. People aren't willing to come forward because of fear of retaliation. One of the most outspoken people from last year's hearing was David Grush, and he had allegedly been attacked numerous times in various ways and suffered greatly for the information that he revealed to the public, being one of the people testifying who revealed the most information, and it has impacted him in a negative way. So others seeing this may be even more reluctant to come forward. What's going to have to change in order for more whistleblowers to come out?
Yeah, I think, real legislation around whistleblower protection is going to have to both pass, but also be enforced. I think, the retaliation that's been reported by David Grush, Lou Elizondo, and others over the years is highly alarming. If there's nothing there, why are these people being undermined to this level? Again, can't talk about Fight Club because there's no Fight Club, right? Well, there's something absolutely happening behind the scenes, and these individuals making this information known to the public is apparently highly threatening to certain interests. What are those interests? So what's going to move the needle forward? I think a lot of things are going to have to happen. The UAP Disclosure Act, a key piece of legislation, which would have put in place a presidentially appointed review panel of experts across society, academia, to review key cases of unidentified anomalous phenomena, to basically advance the findings without a stake or a predetermined bias in that, and to exert eminent domain upon the defense contractors who presumably are in possession of these craft, these materials, or even these biologics. That is key legislation. It was passed in a very stripped down form last year. And then I do not believe it made any strides in the recent Defense Authorization Act as it passed just recently. So it's in a holding pattern, in a limbo. To my knowledge, there is an airdrop procedure by which this could potentially be reintroduced. But that's going to be a fast act item. And we'll have to see the Trump administration and the cabinet that he puts together. What is their appetite to take on the deep state and basically to force oversight, which has been so profoundly lost? Good steps could be taken. He's put in place, or he's made picks of certain individuals like Senator Rubio and Ratcliffe, who have a history of being highly supportive of UAP legislation. So we'll see what happens there. I think more hearings with other whistleblowers who have had direct involvement in the programs and direct oversight. They may be hostile whistleblowers. I'm sorry, not whistleblowers, witnesses. They may have to be forcibly brought to the stand and grilled on stage, not willingly, but against their will potentially. We're going to have such a confrontational moment with those individuals and corporate entities who have been in possession of this outside the rule of law and against the better interests of the American people and the world population. And so that's going to be very important. So in addition, I think at the presidential executive level, some sort of office for NHI affairs, some direct report to the president himself, who has direct knowledge of these programs and is not compromised, does not have, certain risks hanging over their head that would prevent them from acting in the interests of the American public. That would be very important. And, we can look to the individuals who have been most forthright, who have brought forward the most information against their own professional concern for advancement, their own physical concern for safety. There are outstanding heroes who have brought forward this information to Congress. And, individuals like that we need in these positions to oversee the regulation of how these SAPs function with regards to this topic and how the disclosure of information can be brought out to the public. So I think those are all important shifts. In addition, I think this needs to get out of the United States. This needs to go international. To some degree, we're relying on the US government to undertake disclosure of an event they may not have full understanding of. The compartmentalization, the stovepiping means that how many individuals in the US government really understand the nature of the non-human intelligence that has interacted with humanity so far? There may be very few, there may be none who have a very clear, complete understanding of that. So banging on the door of the Pentagon and demanding that they tell us everything, it's unrealistic. That's not what, defense entities do, right? They gather information, they make it, they securitize it in their space, and they silo it. So it's there's a cognitive dissonance with the ask. And I think getting this outside the US into an international setting and developing the treaties, maybe even the treaty organizations that would regulate both the use of non-human technologies and science, the interaction with non-human entities, and the way that this is brought into especially our technology. Because if our technology is being manipulated in some fashion or is being infused with potent capabilities that we can barely even understand, we're going to have a different world in a decade. Is this why we have a different world today, a decade after? It's possible. We don't know. So I think the international side is key. And then last, the citizen space. There really are layers to disclosure. There's government disclosure, but there's also citizen disclosure, because the citizens have been interacted with, in my view. So what do they have to bring forward? What's their story? That's a big part of the picture. In addition, the non-human intelligence, we need disclosure from them. I don't find it acceptable for them to operate in the way they have, transacting with the individuals and entities that they have potentially. That's not working in the best interest of the human species. So we need disclosure from the entities or forces or intelligences present in our world. And I think these are the next steps for the coming years.
Do you think that mounting public pressure can help shift the needle in a meaningful way? More people are having conversations about this, you and I, for example, and there's a lot of interest growing. So do you think that that is going to help force the hand of the powers that be to get moving and be more honest and transparent about all this?
Yes, I think it is key. I think it's got to come from all sectors of society. We need engagement holistically by the whole human species. And we need individuals, experts in all areas of subject matter and the human knowledge base to come forward and to basically say, we want to know, we want to engage with this. That lowers the pain threshold a bit for government if the people want it and they can handle it, and there's some indication they can handle it. And so in that sense, government doesn't have to, quote, disclose, but rather confirm. And especially if there is citizen disclosure of people coming forward saying what they know, normalizing with society at large, the nature of the interaction that's taken place, then government can come forward and say, yeah, we can confirm the nature of the discourse and what is being discussed is accurate to our knowledge. And there's less of this citizen versus government, human on human oppositional stance that I do think is arising in the disclosure conversation. So yeah, people calling for this, people in religious organizations, congregations saying, we're not afraid. We want to know what the universe is. And if we have to make some adjustments to how we envision the work of God or the work of, the nature of human origins or humanity's presence in God's plan, we'll do it, because we need to know the fundamental truths about our universe in order to progress as a species and not stay regressed in these old ancient animosities and dynamics that pit us against one another.
One of the problems that a lot of people have is the lack of hard evidence, quote unquote, because we get a lot of testimonies, we get a lot of word of mouth, but we haven't seen, apart from the videos that have been released, Nobody's wheeling out an alien corpse, in front of Congress to show, hey, look, this is what we've got. Where do you
Mhm.
think that's going? And at what point do you think that we'll have harder evidence that will confirm in the skeptic's eyes, oh my gosh, this is real?
Right, right. Well, I know among those who like to debunk this topic, that's their go-to argument is where's the hard evidence? It doesn't exist. It's all testimony, hearsay, secondhand, third hand. In my view, that argument for hard evidence is a soft argument. The hard evidence is possessed by and has been carefully stewarded by the very entities, organizations, defense corporations that have the resources and the air cover to keep this from the American public. So the more that we demand hard evidence as the only route to any acknowledgement or understanding, we basically put the power back in their hands, which I'm sure they would love, right? Because then they can met out that hard evidence or not to their liking. So I do think hard evidence will eventually be key to move society broadly over the evidentiary threshold of, is this really real or is this just reported to be real? Okay. But I don't think that necessarily in the stepwise fashion is the next and only step to take. We have testimony from former presidents, high level, high ranking government officials, individuals overseeing whole military agencies from all sides of this political spectrum coming out saying UAP are real. We are being interacted with by a form of technology that is likely of non-Earth origin. And some are going as far as saying that there is zero doubt that there is a non-human intelligence in our world and that it is interacting with humanity. Add to that, in the civilian space, how many thousands of people have reported some direct encounter or some direct effect via an encounter with either craft or entity? I mean, we're talking about tens, possibly hundreds of thousands of people if people are given the chance to communicate their story without ridicule and without efforts to directly obfuscate that. So I think we need to move up the evidentiary curve, starting with testimony, starting with photo, video, sensor, multi-sensor data, starting with testimony from military pilots, personnel, government acting officials. Like, we move up that curve in order to put pressure on those who have the hard evidence. But, if we just stop there and say, well, without that, we can't even entertain the possibility, I think we're really shooting ourselves in the foot.
What do you think are some of the biggest moments that we've seen outside of the government space? I'm talking about the Phoenix Lights or other UFO sightings that have happened in front of tens or hundreds or thousands of people. What are the biggest ones to you, and how important are those in terms of people's consciousness of this phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, I think all reports are valuable. They should all be considered and taken in. But I think starting with the most credible, with multiple witnesses who are individuals with real careers on the line that have no personal interest in coming forward and putting their professional life at stake to say, I saw something, this is what it did. Those sailors in the 2004 Nimitz case, that video was brought forward in 2017 alongside the New York Times article. I mean, go listen to Kevin Day. Go listen to some of the individuals who were on deck that day, who saw the radar information come through, who Tim Gallaudet got the email from his superior saying, what the heck is going on? This is anomalous, and we're going to have to stop the flight exercise in order to deal with it. After which that email was wiped from his device, as well as those other acting officials parallel to him. I mean, this is significant, and in some cases there is multi-sensor data backing it up. The Aguadilla UFO case in Puerto Rico, where this transmedium craft, moving over the airport, goes out into the water, arises, splits into multiple vehicles. I mean, there is solid video footage of this. Some of this video footage has been verified by the Defense Department. So, I mean, just starting at that level, I think is key. I know there have been mass witness events like Phoenix Lights, which I think remains as one of the most important sightings in US history. I think there are also cases such as the 1982 Ukraine ICBM incident that was brought forward out of the USSR by George Knapp, in which UFOs hovered over a nuclear armed base in the USSR, Ukraine, and put those missiles into an active launch sequence that could not be stopped by the personnel of that base. This triggered, in part, a massive investigation by the Ministry of Defense in the USSR. They were alarmed by it. They undertook one of the largest UFO studies possibly in history surrounding it. So, if these craft are able to put our nuclear weapons into a launch sequence or to deactivate them in the context of deterrence within the Cold War setting, I mean, I don't think it's logical yet to jump to that, to thinking that that's a message of peace. I think it's a direct incursion and a show more of force and capability, possibly to impress the militaries of the world, to cow to this presence that has such capabilities. So, I mean, there are so many indications that make it very clear that something anomalous is in our world, operating in ways we don't understand. Go into the oceans, there's a whole record of USOs that's been well documented. And I know Richard Dolan is in the process of writing a 3-volume set of the highest credibility, most solid USO cases in history to demonstrate that this is not an aerospace phenomenon. It's a whole Earth system phenomenon. And if we don't understand our oceans and what's operating in our oceans, off our coastlines, that's a major concern, for those who are tasked with defending human interests and public safety.
We've been speaking about this mostly in a very contemporary, modern context, but there's a lot of mounting evidence going by hieroglyphics, cave paintings, whatnot, and other types of various evidence that there may have been contact with extraterrestrials dating back, generations or millennia. What is your opinion on that? How far back do you think this goes? Have they always been around in your view?
Well, I think naturally this phenomenon is going to make us question and revise our notions of human origins, human history, the story of our civilization. I think that's healthy. I think that's a part of what society needs to go through. So just say that. I do think what we're dealing with now is a quantitatively distinct phenomenon from what might have transpired in ancient times. This is clearly a 20th century event in my view. Not to say it's the only contact event, but it is distinct, I would say. When you look at the number of craft, their behavior, how they've interacted with humanity, we simply don't have an ancient record that substantiates the claim that who's here now was here then. I think there are indications that someone might have been here then, but how do we verify that those entities are the same that are in our world presently? It's very evident, in my view, that how the UFO phenomenon and when and around what events it began to become so high volume and global, there are indications there as to the possible intent of the visitors. The alarm regarding our nuclear escalations and use of nuclear weapons, for example, the technology that we have that could potentially interface or even integrate with technologies of non-human intelligences. I mean, there are strong indications that what we did in the 20th century on Earth propelled a new kind of visitation. And when you go back into the historical record, there are indications, but it's very difficult to correlate that to the present. And basically the utility of ancient sightings is not as good as the sightings we have today, where we have cameras, sensor data, ways that people can capture reports in the moment versus as word of mouth or oral history or oral tradition. So I think we need to, in the long sense, revise our notions or at least question them of human origins. But in the immediate sense, we have to deal with the entities and the forces that might be present in our world now. That's the urgency and the consequence we're faced with. And to the degree that we expand away from that to consider every data point, to basically go on a parade of possibilities around the block, with novel theories, and everyone wants to be, have the next great idea, when there are more probable explanations staring us in the face, I think.
Reed, I can't thank you enough for your time. This has been a great conversation. Could go on a lot longer, but we're almost out of time. I was just hoping that we could end it off by giving the audience a little bit of a hopeful message, what to anybody who's concerned about where this might be leading? What would you say to somebody who has doubts about the impact that this might have on society or people's lives fundamentally?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're all looking at the news every day, and we're all looking at the dismal picture of world affairs, conflict, nuclear escalation. It's very alarming. And our society as a global society is in really rough shape. Unity and cooperation is at its lowest point. The potential for regional or even global conflict, I would say, is probably at its highest point since the end of the Cold War. So the potential that there is a fundamentally unifying event taking place that could unify our species as a human species, as a human family, via contact with non-human entities, I think is extremely exciting. I think there are indications that it's more than just a pipe dream. It's a real possibility. It's really possible when you look at the information and the historical evidential record that has been compiled over decades, since 1947, right? And so the potential of this to bring us together is considerable. I think we need to thread a careful course. Basically, opportunism and competition over non-human technologies would be the divider, right? But contact could be the unifier. And I think people need to expand out of this purely human-centered view of the universe, this purely human experience that we've been living, to suggest maybe we're part of a larger ecosystem of life. Maybe we need to get involved with that ecosystem ultimately. And what could that do for our world as we struggle in this state of isolation and ignorance regarding the ecosystem itself? We should really not destroy ourselves as a global society before we have the chance to realize what we're a part of. And I think that possibility is within reach, and it's not just within the reach of the powers that be. I mean, I would put this firmly in the hands of the citizens. If we're not the human species, who are we talking about? It's you and me. We are human. We are prime actors in this storyline. And I think people need to claim that agency, get involved, learn about the phenomenon, learn what's happened, think through it logically, cautiously, responsibly, which is one of the things I focus on teaching people to do. And basically, as we think through it, we can begin to experience the benefit of what this might entail for the human species as we go forward.
That's a great message. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you, everybody who watched. Please check out Reed's website and his podcast, Emergent. I've been devouring it. It's great. Lots of great insights there. And I'm sure that this is the first of many such conversations that we'll have about UAPs, because it's a topic that touches everybody. So I think it's really worth discussing in great detail, and I look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Rob. Great to be here with you.